I'm focused on the spirit cause it keeps me from his fire. The Holy Ghost was with me, so my fear I leave behind. My sins were all diminished when he took that breath and died. And if you think I'ma give up on my God, the devil is a lie. The devil is a lie. The devil is a lie.
Hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about a little bit about the Tucker Huckabee interview that dropped on Friday. And there's been lots of snippets or speculation about what the interview was going to be like, especially because we talked a lot about the plane allegations and how security treated him last week. And so Tucker actually opened up his interview before he aired the interview talking about the lead up to the interview, including the security situation that went down. Also, we'll be talking a bit about James Talarico. I saw a snippet of him on, I think it was CNN, trying to trash Republicans about their healthcare policies and mentioning the Bible and saying something that's just really false about it. And so I was actually at the airport, and I was like, oh, I just really want to go off in a way that just doesn't kind of allow me. So I was actually with that opinionated girl, and if you know her from TikTok, she has a lot of different opinions, but has really blew up a lot talking about like Israel US relations and things like that. But and she like went to the bathroom, and when she went to the bathroom, I like recorded real quick, like, this is what I think about James Talarico, and I have so much more to say. So we'll say more about it, and I'm sure I'll say more about it later. But man, this guy really gets on my nerves. And also something really interesting happened at the BAFTA awards the other night, and I just found out about it. I'm not really plugged into award seasons and things like that, but the only thing I really care about, I'm like, is Golden going to win that Oscar? Like, that's the only thing I'm really kind of paying attention to. But BAFTA's like the Oscars over like in the UK, and someone with Tourette's yelled out the N-word while Michael B. Jordan was on stage. So a lot of people are very obviously upset about it, and it's just a wild thing that happened. But we'll talk about that and some other things as well. There was the Supreme Court decision that came down. I haven't talked about it yet. I haven't even posted like a little snippet video of it, so I can briefly talk about that as well. But before we jump into everything, I hope you guys had a great weekend. Mine was very busy. But please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation as well, because it does cost to stream and run my site, all that stuff. So you guys can support. I very much do appreciate it, and appreciate you guys. You guys can also check out different merch that's available on my website that you guys can pick up, like this My Money, My Business, this Frederick Douglass shirt. I'll have to get like a Clarence Thomas shirt, and because I was going through the airport and they were showing different figures for like Black History Month, and I was making sure that there wasn't no Ketanji Brown Jackson if they weren't going to have Clarence Thomas and stuff. But I didn't see her from some of the stuff that I saw. But I'm like, I gotta get some Clarence Thomas merch. Really, showcase a great. But I've got other stuff as well. Where's my goat hoodie? Where's my goat? Oh, right at the top. Here we go. The goat hoodie. You guys still can get a goat t-shirt, which, it's getting warmer, but it's obviously not too warm right now. I was in Texas, and it wasn't hot. But it was, when I was coming home, I had to do a layover in Missouri. And as soon as I got off the plane, I could see my breath. I'm like, oh boy. And then you get into Michigan, and there's was there snow on the ground last night? Yeah, it begun to snow. And of course it was cold, and I didn't pack a thick coat and stuff, so I just had my like jacket. When I was trying to get the car, I'm like, where are you? Talking, my sister was picking me up, who had drove to the wrong terminal. So so she had to come back around. But I had a good weekend. So I reunited with some people who I went to Israel with, and the organization that took me to Israel, who invited me out, was Kufi. And Kufi is Christians United for Israel. Now, when they liked my content, and that's why I got the invite. Kufi wasn't like, "Hey, you have to say certain things. You have to." They didn't say you have to post certain things or take certain positions or whatever. They just, again, liked my content and invited me out. But they didn't have like any editorial decisions about what I said or posted or anything then or now. So I had been missing a lot of those people because they were just really cool. You know, most of us evangelicals, with the exception of that opinionated girl who was Catholic, but we just had an amazing time there, reminiscing. I think about, just my journey, my trip there a lot, and I was really glad that I had that experience with people that I really connected with. So I was glad to see them again at a conference that they had this past weekend, and just had a really great time. And like me and that opinionated girl, we talked a lot about. I'm not saying her name because I'm not positive if she kind of makes it public. I think people might know it, but I just am, being a little careful. But we just we our planes like taking off are close, so we spent a lot of time just kind of chit chatting yesterday about different topics and subjects and stuff. So she really gets a lot of hate online. I get a lot of hate online, but she gets way more hate than I do. But she told me a little bit about Amfest, what that was like. She was actually there, and there was a lot of groypers there, like Nick Fuentes folks, and who were just pretty terrible to people. So she was telling me a bit about that experience and stuff. So just a very interesting, informative time. But I had fun. Did a lot of traveling because I had just a lot of layovers. So I'm still a bit tired. I got in not too late, but it's just tiring being on a plane, I guess, for extra amount of hours and stuff. So glad to be back with you guys though. So last week, well, I guess it was this past, no, I guess we're in a new week. So we got the decision about Trump and his tariffs. And if you've been following me for a while, you know I haven't been terribly fond of the tariff situation. And I knew that they were going to strike it down. I figured that they would. The only thing surprising to me about it was that it was 6-3 and not like 9-0. So I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that Trump was upset about it. But, the Supreme Court justices, even the ones that he picked, aren't there to be loyal to him. They're there to interpret the law correctly. Now, what's funny about the liberal justices is they agreed that they should pump the brakes on Trump's emergency powers, the emergency power that he was trying to use to enforce tariffs. But they disagreed with some of the reasoning as to the executive power, which is funny because we know that they don't mind the executive branch amassing more power. They just, I don't know, is it like sticking it to Trump? Because I think it was Gorsuch who made the point, like, you wouldn't want Obama to be able to, or, well, I don't know if he named Obama, but like let's just say Obama to be able to say, hey, there's an emergency because of climate change, therefore we're going to do all these tariffs and basically destroy the auto industry, for the sake of climate change. Republicans would be pulling out their hair, screaming bloody murder, saying you don't have the right to do that. So we don't want to give power to our opponents that they themselves will. We don't want to give too much power to Trump that our opponents will obviously use to go extraordinarily too far. So I was a bit surprised by Alito and Thomas and their decision to, I guess, vote on the side of Trump, but it did fall. Again, I'm not surprised. Trump has found other means to enact his tariff policies. But I'm not surprised in the least bit. So I know some of you push back like I trust Trump with the tariffs, and it's like, well, he's got to do them. I don't think that they're maybe always bad policy. I've taken issue with some of the implementations on it. I think he's a little too trigger happy with them. And I don't like the long term. I can do it because I declare it's an emergency thing. So he's found other methods. So many of the tariffs are just back on anyway. At least I think for like 150 days is what I think the law that he's using it allows for. So that's still a big chunk of time. So we'll see what happens. Again, not surprised. I don't know how you guys felt about it, but I certainly was not surprised in the least bit about this. So there's also something else going on internationally with in Mexico, Puerto Vallarta. I'm not saying that great. But my dad's done quite a few missionary trips in Mexico, and there's an area that he goes to that's pretty dangerous with like cartel territory. And right now, there's like gang wars going on with the cartel, and it's not in the like gang infested area. It's like the tourist area. So they were telling people to stay in, lock themselves inside, and you can see smoke and all sorts of different things. And so when I was at the airport, I got a call from my I was talking to my sister on the phone, one of them, and they were telling me that the Christians in Mexico were reaching out to us to pray for them and pray for the situation because it was so crazy at that time. And this is like a tourist spot where people go on vacation. It's really nice, when there's a difference when my dad goes into like other parts again where it's like cartel heavy versus this area, because I think they stayed, they went and they did church stuff and ministered to people, but they stayed in like a nice hotel, so it was more comfortable than like the average mission trip that they would usually go on. And for them to not care and have all this kind of breakout in an area where a lot of Americans get, not just Americans, but a lot of people come to vacation and they assume that it's safe, it just really disrupts a lot of things for the country. And when people don't care about that stuff, things are getting really scary. So it'll be interesting to see how the Mexican government reacts to all this stuff, and the US. I know Rubio, was warning people about the safety dangers. Continued to pray for the people there that situation is calmed and that the cartels are defeated. They have a lot of power, but pray that that the people of Mexico can also live quiet and peaceable lives. So just some really concerning stuff going on around the world. But since it is a tourist attraction and a lot of Americans go, it's just not something that, if it continues to kind of spread out, I don't see the U.S. just kind of just observing and not doing more, which they probably don't want us to do more and get involved. But I don't think Trump's may take a back seat to that. I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, just keep the people there in your prayers. Speaking of prayers, let's go ahead and just talk about James Talarico and something that he said on, which network is this? CNN, of course. So James Talarico, we've talked about him a lot. He's running against Miss Jasmine Crockett, and there's like another Democrat in the race. But Jasmine Crockett, she was a favorite for everybody, and he keeps getting a lot of airtime. And a lot of attention, like not just airtime on these news networks, but I first saw him on Joe Rogan. That's when he first kind of like came on my radar, and he said the most bizarre, crazy stuff about his religion which he would say he's a Christian, but his interpretation of Christianity is insane. But he really wants to he keeps complaining about people on the right and their view of social issues and how they live out their political convictions. But he himself is very into social issues. He just takes the opposite side and he will twist the Bible to his particular beliefs, and he will scold Christians who are interpreting the word accurately and trying to live out their faith, I would say appropriately. And he'll condemn them and say, like, no, my way, this is how it should be, or this is what I believe it is because of this. Like, he told Joe Rogan that abortion in the Bible, you can make a pro-choice argument. And so Joe Rogan asked, how can you do that? And he said, well, Mary had a choice whether she was going to carry the Messiah. And technically the scriptures, the angel was like, this is what's going to happen. And she's like, amen. That's what actually really happened. But whether a woman bears a child, she has a choice whether she's going to be impregnated. But should she have the option to go and take the life of her child? No. Like, I mean, there's a lot. What he'd really have to be asked, and I have seen progressive Christians ask this question. There's a progressive pastor on TikTok who had a debate with one of the people from Students for Life, and the question was asked to him, like, do you believe that Mary could have an abortion while she was pregnant with Jesus? And he got into a sticky situation. Then he kind of, I think, said the story was metaphorical. I'm like, what? Like, so do you not like believe the story? So I gotta go find more of it because there's just a kind of the snippet going on. But does James Talarico believe that because of choice, Mary could abort Jesus? That would have been moral and acceptable if that's the route he's going to go. He said other dumb stuff like life starts at first breath or whatever, but he was pushing that kind of ideology on Joe Rogan's program. And so he's been on Ezra Klein's podcast and said crazy things. And we've talked about him other times saying crazy things. So this is a new crazy thing that James Talarico is saying. It's just not true.
If you read the New Testament, Jesus doesn't spend most of his time preaching or teaching or even praying. He spends most of his time healing the sick. Right now, we have politicians in Congress with Christ follower in their Twitter bios, but they are kicking the sick off their health care, and they're willing to shut down the government to do it. We as lawmakers, especially those of us who proclaim a devout faith, have a special obligation to heal people, not make them sicker. I feel like too often we sanitize this discussion about healthcare by talking about premiums and continuing resolutions, but a budget is a moral document. What happens to people who don't have health insurance? Diabetics ration their insulin, seniors skip their medication, and people die. In fact, it's estimated that 51,000 Americans will die needlessly if all these Republican cuts go through. That's 51,000 flesh and blood human beings. That's a moral crime. In the wealthiest country in human history, no one should die because they can't afford their health insurance.
So, him saying like, "Oh, we're supposed to." Okay, let me back up. First things first. What he said isn't true. Oh, Jesus, if you read the New Testament, so you're reading the Gospels, he says Jesus didn't spend most of his time teaching or preaching or even praying. He spent most of the time healing the sick. That is just objectively false. It's just not true. Now, are there a lot of things that Jesus did that aren't recorded in the Bible, including healings? Sure. But even the praying thing is ludicrous. Like, the Bible talks about praying without ceasing. There's one preacher who said, I never pray more than 15 minutes, but I never go more than 15 minutes without praying. Like, being in constant communication with God is just something we ought to be doing. So even this claim about the not that he prayed less than he healed the sick, it's just ludicrous. But Jesus was constantly teaching and preaching to people throughout the Gospels, constantly, and more than you see stories about healing. And not only that, but the stories where he's teaching obviously take up a lot of real estate. The healing stories, they may be a few scriptures, but you have a lot of real estate in the Bible of him just teaching different lessons and parables and so on. It's just ludicrous to say this. What is the point of saying something so blatantly not true? Is it just to test how much people know and if they're willing to combat your nonsense? Because if I was a reporter and I heard him say that, you would have seen me go something like that. My face would be like, excuse me. Yeah, I would have had to fact check him. I don't know if she knows that, but not accurate. So there's that. The miracles that Jesus performed in the Bible, whether it was healing the blind, cleansing the leper, or even telling, hey, disciples, you're hungry, like cast the nets on the other side, or hey, you need to pay your taxes, here, go fishing, there's going to be some gold in the fish's mouth, or or feeding of the multitudes, or walking in water, just different kinds of miracles that are done in the Bible. They're all done still to affirm Jesus, that he is who he says that he is God, that he's divine, that the words that he's preaching mean something, to draw people to him. So after he performed the miracle of feeding the multitude, there are people who were chasing him down. They're like, we want to make him the king. We're going to take him. We want him to do more of these of these miracles. We could just say performances. They wanted him to perform for them. They were interested in seeking his hands, not seeking his face. And so Jesus when they had a confrontation, he rebuked them. He's like, you guys are just here for the fishes and the loaves. You want the stuff. You don't actually want me. You don't want me. Like, you're missing the whole entire point. And so he ended up driving them away with talk about, like, you have to eat my flesh and drink my blood, because they didn't understand what he meant by that. And they're just like, oh gosh, it's gross and that's weird. And but he ended up driving them away. And so James Talarico even pointing out downplaying how much he taught and he preached to bring up this point about healing and to uplift that, so for the purpose of dunking on Republicans, is just so wildly inappropriate. And he's once again missed the entire point. The purpose of all these miracles is to point people back to Jesus is the way. It's the teaching. It's the truth. All of that is the affirmation of Jesus is Lord. That's the whole point. So him trying to use that to dunk on the Republicans is really gross. It is really, really, really gross. And then him complaining, saying like, oh, they have Christ, follower in their bios, but they want to kick people off of healthcare. Okay, supernatural healings versus people having a job and performing services for you. Yes, people need services because they do need to be well. And then debating about who's going to pay for that is not the same as you having faith in the Lord healing you and restoring you. They're not the same. They're not. It's not like they didn't have physicians and stuff back then. Did the woman with the issue of blood not see many physicians, and to the point where she had no money left? And then she had to go to Jesus. If James Talarico was taking out some time to be like, you need a healing, you need to seek the master's hand. You need to go to church. You need to find some people with some faith to pray over you. That's not what he's doing. He brought all this up so he can dunk on Republicans. It's not the same thing. We're talking about the supernatural healings versus who's going to pay for your medical care, who's going to pay your bills. And I think it's interesting. He just raised 2.6 million, probably more than that, going on Colbert show for the stunt that he pulled and the hoax that he pulled with Jasmine Crockett, with the FCC, them claiming like, oh, Trump doesn't want me on because I'm going to flip Texas and make it blue, when the truth is that the lawyers were concerned about equal time, and they're like, well, you can get Miss Crockett on there, and they didn't want to do that, so they put it on YouTube and just claimed that they were being like silenced or suppressed or whatever and intimidated. So they were like, oh, we raised all this money in 24 hours or 48 hours or whatever. Okay, you do have money or a capability to raise money. So what I always find interesting is that these politicians who raise money so they can do whatever don't just raise money. I mean, well, raise money so they can win their races and stuff. Why don't they raise money to actually help people in need? They have a capacity to do it, a capability to do it. You could just go to the hospital and just start clearing out people's debts. You could do that. Like, I want to pay some bills. Give me some bills. You could do that. There's also the other point that people who are doctors, that is their labor. And you can have a personal conviction. Christians have a personal conviction, a personal challenge to help those in need. He's complaining because we don't believe in bloated government doing stuff for people. When they mention like Matthew 25, like, you got to take care of all these people, they're talking about social, like blowing up the welfare state. And I mean, blowing like it ballooning and just keep adding and make it bigger and bigger, not destroy it, but they want to make it bigger and bigger. Christians should say, I want to reach into my own pocket to help the needy. I want to raise money myself to help the needy. I want to volunteer my time because maybe I don't have the financial resources myself, but time is valuable. Money is like just a stand-in for the time you put in, the labor you put in, the skill with the time and labor that you put in. And it's basically interpreted as its currency. I don't have money. You can say I'm not making the money that I would like to make, but my time is valuable. I'm going to volunteer. I'm going to do what I can to help a mother in need, a child in need, whatever. That's what Christians ought to be doing. Rand Paul, I mentioned him a lot because he's a physician. And if the government is going to tell him that he has to do things because he's a physician, he says that's slavery when you're trying to compel my labor like that. But as a Christian, I have a conviction to try to help people in need. So he would do like free eye exams and surgeries and things like that for people who needed the help. James Talarico, being high and mighty about money, he wants to confiscate from millionaires and billionaires and so on, which he does do the class warfare stuff, by the way. Him trying to confiscate their money to take care of other people, that's not the Christian thing to do. The Christian thing to do is you following that conviction. If you want to enforce those laws to make people pay for stuff, that's one thing. But that's not your Christian conviction making you confiscate other people's money. It's not. It's not. And then he said a line about like that he wants, as politicians, we're supposed to want to heal people. Okay, why are you a politician and not a doctor? Why aren't you a nurse? Why aren't you somebody who takes blood at a plasma center or something? Why are you running for Senate? You're not healing people. A lot of your policies actually hurt people, to be frank, sir. You're not healing anybody. That's not the profession you chose. You're not praying for anybody to be healed or anything like that. That's not what you're doing. That's not what you're doing, sir. And then I'm also thinking, like, my mind immediately goes to like Peter when there was a lame man sitting outside the temple gates saying, hey, like, because he would be taken to beg every day. And so Peter's like, I ain't got money, but what I have, I'll give to you. And he prayed for him and he was healed. And people were amazed because the man was 40 years old. So it's not like everybody didn't know him. He was there every day. They would send him there at the gate. And all of a sudden he's walking. And you know what that did? That made everybody look and say, oh my gosh, there is something to this Jesus who resurrected from the dead. It's not like we can deny it, because they're saying the power that gave this man the ability to walk is a reason, is Jesus, who was crucified. And Peter was like, yeah, by the way, y'all crucified him, but God is still good. And he's still merciful, and y'all can still, you can still, believe in him. And you had people of authority getting mad, but they're also like, what can we do? Because there's all these people out here who are cheering about Jesus because the miracles performed. So that goes back to what I was saying earlier, that the miracles are meant to point toward Jesus being the truth. It's very nice when you receive something from the Lord, when you benefit, when my brother's walking today because of the grace of God. There's a song we sing in church, Made a Way. And there's a line that says, and I'm standing here only because you made a way. That's true. It's true. I've seen many amazing and wonderful things in my life. I believe in the miracle working power of God. And it is amazing when whether you receive something that is a spiritual healing, a financial breakthrough, or you're physically touching your body. Whenever God does something like that, it's amazing, incredible. All the glory and honor to God. But it's supposed to be all the glory and honor to God. It's all meant to point back to him. So James Talarico is, he has to repent or he ain't making it in. Let me put it that way. You can't keep lying on God like this, especially to excuse some of the most heinous things. We need to heal people. You tried to use the virgin birth to justify killing babies. And you're like, oh, well, the Republicans, they're going to do things to kick people off healthcare. And what do you even mean by that? Like people having to supply like work requirements? What what specifically are you even referring to? So I don't like this guy. I don't like Jasmine Crockett either, but I don't like this guy. He gives me Pete Buttigieg feels. He's really slimy. And obviously if he does well in Texas, I think he's going to, like Beto O'Rourke, have higher aspirations. And you have to be careful about these progressive Christians who are trying to take scripture and twist it into something else. CNN, they did that hit piece on Charlie Kirk about Christian nationalism. And Charlie Kirk, he didn't identify as a Christian nationalist. He didn't. You can say that you can, by CNN's definition, like he fits in that category, is like, if you believe that America was founded as a Christian nation, and if you advocate for more Christians to be involved in like government and politics and stuff, which I don't understand why anyone wouldn't advocate that people who share their values get more involved with politics. It doesn't mean that you support a theocracy. Like Andrew Wilson was talking about that on Joe Rogan too. And he's like, I don't really think I know anyone like in that movement of Christian nationalism. And I'm sure he knows a lot of pretty radical people who advocate for just setting up a straight theocracy to any kind of, I guess, serious degree. But if you just think about it, like, why wouldn't you want people who share your values to seek office or to advocate for your shared principles? Why wouldn't you do that? If you believe you're right, why wouldn't you? And you not only right, but that your worldview is going to lead to better results, a more moral and just society. Why wouldn't you advocate for that? And it's not like our politics aren't moral claims and us debating moral claims all the time. So anyway, I mentioned last week that a lot of people would fit under this umbrella that CNN is making about the Christian nationalist definition. So under the definition, yeah, it's sure to put it's fair to put Charlie under it, but he himself did not identify with that. And I showed a clip of him being asked about Christian nationalism, and he said what they're trying to do is they're trying to make Christians feel guilty about advocating for their beliefs. That's what they're trying to do. And that's what James Talarico is constantly doing as well. He's trying to shame Christians for advocating against baby murder. He's trying to convince, to shame people for fiscal responsibility when it comes to the welfare state and other things like that. Not that people don't advocate like Rand Paul, like, hey, we should care for people who are poor, widows and orphans or whatever ourselves. But if you don't want to enact it and push that stuff in government, then he wants to shame you as being a bad Christian. You have to follow Christianity in the guidelines that he's setting forth, because it's not like he's saying that stuff shouldn't be involved, and talked about. On his website, it says it's time to flip tables. Every time I really see him in a clip, he's talking about Christianity, and he's condemning Christians because they don't agree, they don't see the world the way that he sees it. So I think it's really funny that people like James Talarico can push Christianity and shame everybody else, but they're not talking about how he's some kind of Christian nationalist or that he's a threat for trying to advocate for the morals that he believes in or his interpretation of the Bible. But they're willing to uplift people who have a progressive worldview, and you can see it, especially like online, and there's all these really progressive pastors and stuff who come on and condemn right-wing Christians, mostly because they're trying to make the salt lose what makes it important. They don't want it to be able to preserve anything. They're trying to weaken it. If you read stuff about communism, but there's a book called Tortured for Christ, and there was a pastor who was in a communist country, and at first they came in and they're like, hey, you guys can still be Christian, you guys can still live your faith, but they put all these like parameters on what they're going to be able to do. And so he was listening, and his wife's like, why aren't you saying anything? He's like, if I say something, you'll have a dead husband. And she said, I'd rather have a dead husband than a coward. The pretty courageous, bold woman. And so he ended up speaking out, and he ended up continuing to do like underground church stuff and still preaching the full gospel. And he was imprisoned and tortured. And so that the reason why it's called Tortured for Christ is just because it's about his life and the lives of other Christians as they were tortured for Christ. And if you read it, which you should be, I got a free copy from the organization Voice of Martyrs. I think I ordered it, and they just sent it to me. It's been a long time since I read it, but it was a book that definitely had me in tears, just thinking about what other Christians have to go through in nations that aren't free like the United States. Maybe we don't feel like it's as free as it ought to be, but there are other people who are really suffering, really putting their lives on the line for their faith. And sometimes, you might go to another country and put your life in jeopardy. Like if you go to a Muslim country where, there's apostasy laws and you're not supposed to evangelize to people and get them to try to convert, you're putting yourself at risk. You go to China, you got to operate in interesting ways, or I don't know, you might not come back home, so it's they arrested a Christian pastor. Well, he was Chinese, but they arrested some pastors over in China. We talked about that a couple weeks ago because of their operation of the underground churches. So they'll come in and they'll give you like a version of, hey, you can still practice your faith, but you have to do it in these sort of parameters, because they don't want the full gospel to conflict with how they operate. Like China doesn't want, the gospel to start inspiring people to be like, this government's not right. And that the communists, they don't want the gospel to start inspiring people to be like, what they're doing isn't right. Just think about like the slave Bible that they pushed out, during the era of, slavery in the United States of America. They cut out things like Exodus. Whole book of Exodus would be gone. They don't want slaves getting the idea that God will deliver them and make them free. So there was quite a few passages that they took out of the slave Bible because they didn't want people to get the idea that slaves should be free, that they're also made in God's image, that, that they should be treated well, that man stealing is a punishable crime by death. So they there were certain aspects that they allowed them to have in their faith, but they wanted to teach them to be obedient, but they didn't want to give them hope for something better, so people see the value in having some kind of religion, but they don't want the true liberty of the gospel coming in. So if they can come in, because you might just find it very weird that there are so-called Christians out there at all that will try to say, hey, the Bible doesn't say anything about homosexuality because that word wasn't invented until 1940 something. And it's not really about homosexual when they mention the Bible. It's really about pedophilia. And that's, and people who are in dominating positions, oppressing people in weaker positions, and they'll do all this twisting. And have you ever thought to yourself, like, why don't they just like not do Christianity if it's so bothersome to them and the things that they believe, just be an atheist or whatever? People see value in religion. Everyone's religious to some degree, and they believe in something. They believe in something. And I also do believe that, there's a bit of let's say darker influence coming in and trying to get people to compromise on these particular beliefs and infect the church world, so they're not bold in their faith and bold in what is the truth. So they'll let you have this corrupt version and say this is the true thing, you can have it, you're free, without allowing the fullness of the gospel to truly set you free. So I think people like James Talarico are dangerous on all kinds of different levels. I'm not surprised when people retweet him and they're just like, oh, the Christians need to hear from him, and they because he's lecturing them, and he's lecturing them from their side, so you got all these ex-Christians or people who are atheists or whatever who are cheering him on. And like, I'm not religious, but yeah, I know, because you agree with him. He's wrong and you don't care. I deeply care. I deeply care. So, anyway, I really, really, do not like James Talarico. And I really hope that he doesn't win the primary in Texas. And again, he also, I didn't see this clip with him and Lauren Bobart. Well, I guess we can watch it live together here. Hopefully I don't get dinged by HBO because this is Bill Maher show.
Being Christian is an important part of being truly American. You would also disagree with that.
I do believe that goes to the roots of our foundation. Absolutely. Our founding fathers were Christians.
You know, my granddad was a Baptist preacher in South Texas. My faith is very important to me.
No, it's not. Shut up.
He told me when I was real little that as Christians, we're supposed to follow Jesus' 2 commandments, to love God and love neighbor. And there was no exception to that second commandment. Love thy.
That's not true. Like, if when I saw it was Lauren, because I've just seen like the snippet that she was there, and I wish it wouldn't have been her, because when I think of Lauren, I just think of like different kind of debacles that she has gotten in. I just don't think she would have been the best advocate here to debate against James Talarico on that topic. But they keep talking about you got to love your neighbor, and I just really would like to know why your neighbor is not the preborn. Like, why is it not the preborn? Why are they not made in the image of God? Why you're allowed to kill someone who has a relationship with God, someone that God formed in the womb, that God knows and knew before the foundation of the world too, but has a purpose for their life. And then you believe that a woman has a blanket right to kill them, which is not only harmful, obviously, to the child who's been killed, but also to the woman who does the egregious sin. So there's nothing about his positions that are loving toward his neighbor, especially when love doesn't rejoice in wrongdoing. So maybe did he say his grandfather was a pastor? His grandfather was either someone who would disagree with him, or he was a trash preacher. But first of all, there's more than 2 commandments, but Jesus summed up the commandments by these 2 things, because they're all going to relate to how you love God and how you treat other people. But you have to prioritize how you love God. You know, Jesus would say, like, you why don't you do the things that I say? Like, how can you love him? You don't do the things that he said. You don't care about the things that he actually says, as far as living right and keeping his commandments and so on, or actually spreading his gospel. You love me, you'll feed my sheep. Okay. But you don't love your neighbor by affirming their sin. And so this drives me crazy. I can't.
Neighbor, regardless of race or gender or sexual orientation or immigration status or religious affiliation. And so in Texas, I'm constantly battling Christian nationalism, a bill that forces every public school teacher to put up a poster of the 10 Commandments, a bill that replaces school counselors with untrained chaplains, a bill that would have taught Christian Bible stories as historical fact to our youngest students. And I always speak up on behalf of my Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, Sikh, agnostic, atheist neighbors, because as a Christian, we as Christians are called to love them as ourselves. And forcing my religion down their throats is not love.
Yeah, you shouldn't force your religion upon them, unlike the militarized Islam or whatever. But you should be telling them that they believe things that are false, that are not true, and that if they want to get to heaven, if they want to be saved, Jesus Christ did die on the cross for their sins as well as our own, and they need to repent and seek the Lord. But just being like, okay, cool, you're Buddhist, okay, you're Muslim, or oh, you don't believe Christ is the Messiah. Well, he is, and he's God, and he died on the cross and he rose again. You need to speak the truth. But he was asked by Ezra Klein, was there like one truth in one way, and he like didn't do well with that answer either, and ended up talking about how much he's learned from Muslims, and he thinks all the faiths are expressions of truth, and the different faiths can say things that are true. They'll say things that aren't true, obviously, just from an objective sort of sense, but they'll say some things that are true. They'll have some good moral principles in them, which isn't totally surprising, because the moral law is written in our hearts. You don't necessarily have to read the Bible to know what is right and what is wrong, but it's definitely going to help. But a lot of people know what's right and wrong, but they suppress the truth. That's also in the Bible too. But at the end of the day, saying some things that are true and accepting the truth are two different things.
And the only thing I'll add, America is not a Christian nation. It is a nation where you are free to be a Christian or any of those other faiths or no faith at all.
I do like that.
And the other, and I recognize that the phrase separation of church and state isn't in the Constitution, but the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause in our First Amendment clearly create a separation between church and state. And many of our founders were deists, which I think a lot of the far right, the religious right in this country would probably call them not real Christians, given their beliefs. And yes, they blended Enlightenment thinking with a Christian background into something that I think a lot of far right Christian leaders would not recognize in this day and age. So I think it's just important that we remember our true history and we try to honor that promise of America, of a melting pot, of e pluribus unum, out of many one. It's a promise we obviously haven't ever fulfilled, but it is one that we're still trying.
So, I mean, I think how Charlie would break it down about how being a Christian nation is probably fair enough, but I would also say like it's obvious that a lot of those principles are obviously sort of written into our American DNA. Not that other people who are of other faiths can't be here and be good Americans, but you do benefit from a Christian ethic, as Ben Shapiro said to Bill Maher. He's like, why is it that you and I agree about like 80% of things, with you being atheist or me being a religious Jew? And he's like, because you were born morally on third base. There's particular Judeo-Christian values that have, I don't remember exactly how I put it, but have but it's a gist of it, that you benefit from a society that's already been constructed around a lot of these ideas and these values. Not too fond of James Talarico. So anyway, let's talk about Tucker. So apparently when he was at the White House not too long ago, I think it was January 11th, and a lot of people were like, why is he even there at all? Like, why are they entertaining him? Which I'm very curious about that. Like, obviously Tucker has a relationship with JD Vance and they're very close. And Tucker, like during the primary, he'd have Trump on and interview with him and flatter him and all kinds of different stuff. But there have been times when he's like criticized his policies for sure. And he tries to be careful about not criticizing Trump himself because he doesn't want, I guess, the blowback of Trump just like totally eviscerating him. But we do know that, I don't know what because of the lawsuit with Dominion and Fox, some of his texts and stuff came to light, and that he wrote about really despising Trump and looking forward to when we wouldn't have to talk about him anymore. Now, lots of people can have pretty angry feelings from time to time, so if you don't want to totally hold them to that, but I just find it very interesting that Trump decided to still kind of want to fool with Tucker after comments like that. So I find that to be interesting. But apparently when he met with Trump at the White House, Trump wanted Tucker to do something about his image of appearing as an anti-Semite, and also like the conflict that he has with his beliefs about Israel and what to do with it and the war that happened, and also his views on a beef, I guess, that he has with evangelical Christians and stuff. And so Tucker reached out to some folks to try to, I guess, make his image better, to speak at some this conservative conference that was supposed to be in Jerusalem. And like I'm gonna totally blow my credibility if I let you come and speak. Like, why would I do that? And he wanted to speak to Bibi, which I don't know why Bibi or anyone in the Israeli government would agree to do that. But I just thought it was interesting that Trump was basically like, you gotta, this is causing a divide within the base, and you need to clean this up. I thought it was interesting that came to light. The beginning of his interview, before he gets to the interview with Huckabee, he complains about, he tells a bit about like the lead up to the interview, but he also goes back into the plane stuff. Now last week I did show you guys the video of him in the airport, and I said it's a 20-second clip, you know, you got to be kind of, you know, leery about it or whatever. He said that the person that he took the photo with was his driver. So he didn't say it was just a security. People were saying he's cozy with the security and stuff. And I'm like, I don't know if this is before or when this is after, because Tucker's really complaining about before they left Israel. So according to him, there's a little more clarity on the situation. It wasn't him being buddy with the security people. So just FYI. But his story about what happened at the airport, which I had gone off of the Daily Mail article, it still doesn't make him seem more rational. How he complained, and because his recounting of the situation ended with, the U.S. doesn't treat American citizens well, or they're not going to take your side against Israel, because of his whole ordeal in getting there to the airport and how security and stuff treated him. And I'll say this again, many people, when they go to the Israeli airport, they do interrogate you. Do they interrogate everybody? Most everybody probably would say that's interrogation. There were some students that went to Israel that I asked, and they said they didn't really get treated that, you know, that bad. But maybe they grilled the people who were there with more, but they could tell I was an adult when I went there, but they knew I was with this group too. Like they just asked a lot of questions. Like Tucker didn't like that they asked about the interview, and what was asked, you know, kind of spoken or whatever. Huckabee says when he's leaving Israel stuff, they ask about who he visit, who he talked to, and all those kind of questions. And he's an ambassador with, you know, a diplomat passport and all kinds of clearance, and they still ask him questions. But they asked me about what was I doing there, what kind of content I made, why do I make that kind of content. I'm like, what? I'm like, why do I have to explain this? Like, because in my mind, I'm like, if I got invited because specifically they saw one of my videos trashing Candace Owens. So for some reason, that goof, I was like, ooh, how interesting. So that's how we kind of came into contact. So I said, you know, I got invited because I made some, you know, pro sort of Israel content. And they're like, well, why would you do that? And in my mind, I'm just like, just take the W. Like, why do you not believe me? Why do you keep grilling me about the stuff that I'm making and my exact follower count? And I'm just like, I could pull up my TikTok right now if you would like, and I'm like, is that my right follower count that I'm telling them? And then you're just like, are you nervous? It seems like you're nervous. It does feel like an interrogation, especially if you're not used to it. And that was when we were in JFK going to get on the plane, because there's only, I guess, 2 places in America where you can take a flight right to Israel. That's JFK and an airport in Florida. At least that's, I'm not 100%, but I think that's the case. And but when we left, that's when I also got like pulled aside. I wasn't in some kind of security room or something, but they had my passport. They put like a special sticker on it, and they were asking me all these questions about my contacts and their phone numbers. I thought they were going to call home to verify that I was who I said that I was. They were asking all these questions about my last name. I didn't know if I shared a last name with some kind of famous terrorist, the way that they were acting. And so I had to go through a special security line, and they had to take I had to take all my stuff out, and they wanted everything to make sure there wasn't, I don't know, some kind of small bomb device in my backpack or something. So they just do all this stuff, man. They just do. It's just their way. And some people don't understand, like, well, why would they do that while you're leaving the country? Like, aren't you glad that they're being pretty serious about people who are leaving Israel to go to the US and not bringing terrorism there? I think that's a good thing. But there's still the point of, what if they got on the plane with a bomb and killed a bunch of Jews and Americans? Like, that would be a bad thing. Like, it's a good thing that they're going through all these security measures and so on. It's just what they do. It is really routine. You may not believe that. And by the way, if I hadn't have gone to Israel in November, I wouldn't know that that's routine. I'd have to just go by what other people might have said after, like, trying to research it. But I have been through it. I know a lot of people who have been. And it is just really routine. So it was interesting seeing Tucker complain about it. And he's like, I paid for a charter plane, which I hate to do because it's so expensive and I'm cheap. And it's funny he said that, because just, if anyone out there gets an opportunity to talk to Tucker, like a Q&A or something, you can bring that up about the charter plane, because he said he doesn't like to do charter planes because they're expensive and they're cheap. Just ask him how many, okay, you say that you're cheap and you don't do. How often do you fly charter planes? Because just because he doesn't like paying for them doesn't mean that someone else isn't paying for them. Just because he doesn't want to pay out of his own pocket doesn't mean that somebody's not getting him on a plane, a private plane. So just consider that. He said it as if, I don't know, Tucker tries to make himself seem more like the everyman, and not like an elitist sort of person, which he would condemn other people in the past for trying to make themselves seem like the everyday sort of man, while he himself boasted about being a snob. So he's reversed on that. But he's just if you ever get the chance, just ask him how often he gets to fly those in those private planes. Again, just because he doesn't want to pay for it out of his own pocket doesn't mean that someone isn't paying for his planes that are private. So we'll have to get into some of the more particulars, or maybe on tomorrow, if I feel like still kind of talking about this tomorrow, because I might still make content about it. I don't know if I'm going to take up the whole live chit-chatting about it, but there was a couple things that were said in the interview that was pretty bizarre. Of course, Tucker told some things that he said some things that weren't true. He had to back up on certain things that he implied or said that he implied, but actually downright said. Milk Bar TV's done a good job getting his comparison stuff together. I'll play a few of it. There were definitely some moments where Huckabee just kind of like really got him.
I'm not saying he worked for Mossad. I don't think we know that.
I think you said it, a turning point event. Everybody knows Jeffrey Epstein.
I said everyone thinks.
The real answer is Jeffrey Epstein was working on behalf of intel services, probably not American. This guy had direct connections to a foreign government. Now, no one's allowed to say that that foreign government is Israel.
I'm not saying.
So, Tucker definitely doesn't keep all of his lies straight because he doesn't really have to, I guess. And much of his audience will just kind of go along with it.
I wish we never had war. Why do we have war?
We're about to have one with Iran, it looks like. How many Americans do you think will die in that war?
I hope none. None died last year when we participated in the 12-day war. Not one.
My sense
you said
is
20,000 would die. They didn't.
I said could.
Yeah, he definitely was fear-mongering with the war and Iran stuff that was popping off. So Yeah. And you know what, Tucker he's been around the block for a while. The sort of fear mongering he was doing about that particular time, about the 12-day war, and Iran, and if we bombed its nuclear sites and stuff, was just out of this world. And after it was over, people like Ben Shapiro and other folks are pointing out, like, remember all these people who said all this crazy stuff was going to happen and didn't. And ask yourself, like, why do you still trust these folks in their prediction? Now, some people just have bad predictions. I don't think it's just bad prediction. I think it was fear mongering, and I do think that Tucker has very much been a mouthpiece of some very terrible regimes. He also accused a very important person, Isaac Herzog, of going to Jeffrey Epstein's island, which he did an apology video, and I'll have to do like a separate thing where I show you more of it. But here's another snippet of what he said in his apology video versus what he actually said in his now deleted section of his interview.
So I asked Huckabee, were you aware that this email suggests that the current president of Israel, Isaac Herzog, went to Epstein's island?
Current president of Israel, current president, who I know President Herzog,
Knowing very well.
apparently was at Pedo Island. That's what it says in the disclosure.
And so I just want to say clearly, I'm sorry to imply that I knew something I didn't know. Of course, I don't know that Isaac Herzog was on the island.
Yes, in the Epstein files, and I don't know that I've heard the current president of Israel respond to it, but he is listed as a visitor to Pedo Island.
But I don't know that, and I didn't mean to suggest that I do know that.
But you're surprised to hear that the current president of Israel, whom you know, is listed as a visitor to Pedo Island.
So yeah, there's no implication there. It was he was on the island, Pedo Island. So that was not true. So I expected the Huckabee would probably do well with this interview. He was a pretty good debater. Like, even when you had like 16, like a bunch of people like running for president and stuff, I really liked Huckabee. But I do want to play this part, the section of the interview where they talked about 14-year-old child soldiers, or young men, still minor soldiers, and what would happen if they were going to, it was either you had to take them out or they're going to kill your kids and family. And Tucker just kind of kept insisting that it was just wrong to kill 14-year-olds. And I don't believe that Tucker would take the position that he's taking, but he still felt compelled to say it anyway, because I don't know, Jew hatred is brain rot, I guess.
I wish that none of those people in Gaza had been killed after October 8th. Well, I say not none of them. I'm glad Mohammed Sinwar was killed. I'm glad that some of those warriors, the people who masterminded and carried out the atrocities of October 7th.
14-year-old Hamas operatives, how do you feel about their deaths?
If they participated in that, then God help them. I'm telling you,
what does
Tucker,
that mean, God help
I don't know that they were 14 years. No, but I'm telling you that when someone commits the acts of atrocity and then they hold hostages, if these were your children being held hostage in Gaza, what would you do to get them out?
I wouldn't want to kill 14-year-olds. I'll tell you that.
Let me ask you something. Would you do whatever it took to get your kids back if they were being tortured, raped, starved, and beaten?
I would not kill children, period.
Well, I'm just telling you.
And I would never make excuses for killing children either.
And I'm not talking about targeting children. I'm talking about...
You told me that 14-year-olds deserve to die because they're working for Hamas.
I'm telling you...
My question is, can you hear yourself?
I do hear myself.
So do you think a 14-year-old child has agency? Do you think that he deserves to die because he's being used by adults? Isn't his death a crushing tragedy?
If he's holding a gun and he's pointing it at someone who's trying to save a hostage, and the only way to save that hostage, I'm telling you, war is a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing. And a lot of innocent people
I'm the one who thinks war is a horrible thing.
No. I think what you don't
I'm trying to explain how horrible it is, and you're saying that the 14-year-old deserved to die.
So, here you go. You're saying they deserve to die. We had a lot of conversations after Alex Preddy was shot by Border Patrol. And people kept asking, like, oh, are you saying just because he kicked the tail lights out of the vehicle and cursed out, agents the other day, and then he kept showing up to these protests and he was following them and cursing them out and got involved in between them and this woman and all this, even if he was obstructing and blah, blah, do you think he deserved to die? And my response would be, it doesn't have anything to do about what he deserves. That's a question that our legal system, like if he was arrested and all that and he charged, he wouldn't be sentenced to death. That wouldn't be what the conclusion of our justice system would be. People can have different opinions on whether or not he deserved it or whatever. But it's really not in the perspective of what was going on with those Border Patrol agents versus him. Whether they believe that he deserved to die, because that's not their place to decide that. That's not they are not there to be executioners. The question was, did they believe that there was an imminent threat to their lives or serious bodily injury to either them or their fellow agents or the other people around? Like, did they have some kind of reasonable expectation that danger was there? And that's how you look at it, and that's how you deem whether it was a justified shooting. A justified shooting doesn't mean that person deserved to die. That's not what that means. So you cannot like it. I don't like it. There's a lot of crass and crude people online on the right who are like, oh, he deserved it, and making jokes or whatever. I think it's a terrible situation. I genuinely do. I wish that he was alive for his family, that he was alive, obviously, for himself, that he went to church and became an amazing Christian or whatever. There's so many things that I could wish for him, but he's gone. It's a terrible situation. It's terrible for him. It's terrible for the agents who are all caught up in this. It's just, it's obviously terrible for his family who kept telling him to be careful. Because maybe they'll always have some kind of blame. People have so many different thoughts when someone dies. So it's a terrible situation. But it's not about did he deserve to die when you look at whether they're going to be considered a justified shooting or someone did the right thing by their own eyes with the standard or whatever. It's not about deserve. So if there's a 14-year-old kid, and there have been situations where there have been children, even younger than 14, who police thought that they had a gun and was pointing it at them, and they believed that their life was in an imminent danger. And it might not even been, it might have been something that genuinely looked like a gun, but wasn't actually. And they believe that their life might have been in danger, and they took a shot. Is it right that a child was killed? No. No. Did the child deserve to die? No. But can you understand how a situation like that might have happened? Especially because there are people out here who do crime. There was a story in the Navy Yard a couple years ago where I think there was they were young. It was like 15-year-old. I think they were both minors. It could have been like 14, 15. And they were stealing cars. And there was a driver who was an immigrant, and he was a Middle Eastern. He might have been Pakistani or something. But he was from the Middle East. He was making money as an Uber driver, I believe it was. And some girls brought a taser, and they were trying to steal his car. And so he started driving, as trying to escape or in the midst of him being tased. And the car ended up going forward, getting into an accident, and like tipping over, and he died. It was a terrible sight. And people were really condemning those girls because as they were getting out of the car, like, where's my phone? Where's my phone? And they're just like, someone is dead. And you're like, where's my phone? Where's my phone? Now, maybe they didn't know he was dead at the time, but it's just a crazy situation. Did they have agency when they tased him and tried to steal his car? Are they absolved of that just because they're kids? There's a reason why our justice system does treat minors differently than adults, but it doesn't mean that they don't have they're not in trouble when things happen. And they really didn't. It didn't result in as much trouble as I wish they probably would have gotten it. Just because people are young doesn't mean that they're not dangerous. Just because they're young does not mean they're not dangerous. If there's a school shooter who's 16, 15, 14, and you're a police officer, and they have an AR-15, and they're about to go into a classroom, and your child is in there, and he's going to take out a couple different kids, including your baby girl, if you do not stop him from going in, are you really not going to take that shot because he's 14 or 15? How do you even know his exact age? Do you have time to check his birth certificate before you fire? You're really not going to take that shot? Because the police obviously would. So let's go to war. Huckabee said, if there's this terrorist, yeah, he's 14. And you can take him out, and you're the only person in the way of him and the terrorists who are going to take your children, who are going to rape them and kill them, all kinds of different things. Are you going to take the shot? And Tucker says, I wouldn't kill a child. So you would let your daughters be raped and taken and murdered. Nobody believes that. Nobody believes that. Sometimes you don't have good options. Sometimes you don't have good options. When he said, God help him, and he's like, what does that mean? It means that you're going to do what you can to keep your family alive. He's going to meet his maker, his creator, and he's going to have to face eternal judgment. That's what that means, Tucker. And as far as his agency and his crimes and how culpable he was and the weight of his sins and the age of accountability, or whatever, that's between him and the Lord at that point. But it means that they're going to keep their people safe. Tucker pretending like he wouldn't save his children in that scenario is absurd. This is the same Tucker Carlson who said that if his brother was a serial killer, that he would help him escape the country to freedom. And that was just a question about, like, him and Matt Walsh were talking about, like, oh, I would never denounce people. I would never, like, even if it was my brother and he had done something terrible, like, I would never denounce him. And then Tucker's the one who added, if my brother was a serial killer, I would help him get out of the country. I hope that's a joke. But he still volunteered that information. It wasn't the one presented that hypothetical to him. So this is just major brain rot. Major brain rot. And he feels compelled to tell these lies, knowing that it's not true. I was talking when I was at the airport the other day, and I was talking to that opinionated girl. She's met like Parker and Dean and those folks in real life. And I'm like, I'm always so annoyed by them because I believe that they're smarter than how they present. And you know, they're very good debaters and stuff like that. They use some tactics, especially on TikTok Live, that I just absolutely hate. I despise. But I wouldn't know about wanting to have like an actual conversation with them because I view them as being so wildly insincere. If you listen to them talk about transgender ideology to try to explain what makes a woman, it's just like you're bending over backwards like you don't have a spine, and you just defy all logic and reason to try to make a case for this thing that I'm like, you're smart enough to know that what you're saying is ridiculous. And they do the same thing with like their abortion prompts and stuff too. And I'm like, I just can't take them seriously because I don't see the sincerity in their argument. People can be dead wrong, but sincere in what they believe. And we can get somewhere or try to get somewhere. But if someone is going to lie to you about what they actually believe, how do you find some kind of common ground with a con artist? So I know he wants to go in and be hostile toward Huckabee and defeat him and to make it seem like even Christian evangelicals like Huckabee are deranged and evil. The chief villains is what he called Christian Zionists, not Hamas, not Israel, because he said Israel's at least acting on their own interest. But these evangelical Christians, like, oh, they'll support them despite them purposely killing women and children, which we reject, as we don't believe that. And Tucker doesn't have good reason to believe that either. His reasoning for that is just really stupid, to be frank. It's something that he repeats, though. So his goal, I'm like, oh, do you hear yourself? Do you hear yourself? Is to make it seem like Huckabee is a monster for acknowledging that war is terrible. But yes, I would protect my family. What Tucker's saying is not moral. Being a coward isn't like a moral position. Being neutral, knowing that it's you do something or your family dies and is murdered, raped, whatever, and you're like, well, I don't want to kill the person with the AK. That's crazy. I saw some other people like Tim Pool was like, I would do some heinous stuff for my kid. But it's brain rot. And what's interesting, when Tucker was talking to different people about, like, well, why do people think I'm anti-Semitic? And then they provide a list, and then he just feigns ignorance, like, how could they believe this? I said this, well, and that I meant it this kind of way, like pretending to be so shocked that people would interpret his hostility and the things and how he goes about different arguments. As anything other than it obviously is. I don't think he's this stupid. I don't think he's just crazy. I think he's playing a game. And I don't know what all kind of deals that he's made, or what how he wants to exactly shape the political landscape, what his in-game motivations are. But the thing that bothers me so much is when people are so insincere. You can be wrong about things, but I just hate when people are insincere. Let's have a real conversation about what you believe, what you stand for. Maybe you're a hypocrite. Like, if we start really pressing in on your values, maybe you'll see a contradiction, and hopefully you're big enough when you see a contradiction that you'll begin to reevaluate your position. But Tucker will just say a bunch of crazy stuff, knowing that people aren't going to hold him accountable. And it goes beyond the Israel stuff. And I've talked about different examples other than like foreign policy stuff where Tucker's just showed he has no journalistic integrity. Like, there was another clip with Tucker about the person he had on his show who claimed that a child was murdered. See if I can find it. Oh yeah. It's like 6 minutes though. I don't I don't know if I want to play the whole thing. I guess maybe I can. I don't think I need to like add much like commentary toward it. So, but this interaction is really insane to me.
Some lunatics.
Can I ask you something?
Yes.
You platformed a guy. You had him on your show, Tony Aguilar.
Don't platform anyone.
Well, you interviewed.
Not a liberal,
Tony
so I don't
Aguilar.
platform people.
Okay, you interviewed Tony Aguilar, who claimed that IDF soldiers killed a little boy in his presence. That didn't happen.
Okay.
It did not happen.
I don't know.
Let me give you the
know
story.
if you know whether it happened or not.
Well, I can tell you why I know it didn't happen.
Okay.
Because we found that little boy less than a week later.
All right.
I was involved, heavily involved, in helping to extricate him from Gaza, 4 different countries were involved in getting he and his mother to safety, get them out of there. Tony Aguilar is a liar.
Okay.
Tony Aguilar claimed that he saw an IDF soldier shoot the little boy. He was fired from the GHF for cause, and he begged for his job back, and they wouldn't give it back because they didn't want him. And he told them that if they didn't give his job back, that he would burn them down.
Okay.
So he goes out. No, let me finish this because it's important for you to understand.
Right.
So this guy then goes out and makes up this story that he witnessed IDF soldiers shooting a little boy.
I don't know that he made it up. He seemed to believe it to me. It's possible he's wrong. I've been wrong many times.
Well, this is a little bit more than just missing a fact. He claimed to be an eyewitness to the murder of a little boy.
Okay.
A little boy that a week later we found.
And you're sure it's the same little boy?
We're absolutely certain.
How do you know that?
Because we have pictures of him. We had descriptions of him. We know his name. We know his mother.
Okay.
He was extricated out of Gaza. It was a very delicate situation to get him out because if Hamas had found out that he was still alive, they would have killed him in order to validate Aguilar's story.
How do you know that?
So he gets out.
How do you know Hamas would have killed him?
Why wouldn't they? Wouldn't they have wanted to kill him? Because that way they could have said that this story was true.
Look,
that Aguilar, I'm just telling you that
what you're saying is true and I have no basis of knowing.
Yeah.
I'm really glad because I don't want little kids to get killed, even 14-year-olds. Okay.
You shouldn't want anyone to get killed.
But let me ask you, is it true? He also made the claim, and he had audio of it and video too, that U.S. contractors were using live ammunition to disperse crowds. And he had video of that. Do you know did he make up that video?
There were times, here's what happened. Crowds would come toward the sites. They were given verbal warnings, and then they were given additional verbal warnings, and shots were fired either in the air, sometimes in the ground. And if they continued to come and threaten, there were times when there were people who were engaged in firefights. That happened.
Oh, they were armed?
Sometimes they were.
They were. Do you know of specific instances where they were armed?
I can probably get you some specific information about that.
I think I know the answer to that. I don't think there's any evidence at all that they were armed.
I also know that.
So the way that if you watch Tucker Carlson when he does interviews with people he's friendly towards, it doesn't have to be foreign policy stuff, but just it's very clear when he wants to put someone on a show to kind of just have them voice their particular perspective so he can just amplify it. And he took offense to the word platform, but he is basically platforming and isn't to even just say there are softball interviews would be absurd. Sometimes it's just like, here, have your way. For example, I bring this example up a lot when he had the guy who claimed to have slept with Barack Obama, took drugs with him, etc. Tucker did not ask like any pressing questions to really challenge the story. He wanted to just let him speak and make all these sort of allegations and things like that. And then when he even opened up the show, he's like, this man even took a lie detector test. Well, Tucker told his audience the man took a lie detector test to try to build up his credibility, but he didn't tell his audience that the man failed the lie detector test. Not that, that 100% means that you're lying all the time, or, because, I don't know how faulty or whatever lie detector tests or whatever, but it's just interesting. He gave that information to build his credibility, but he didn't give you the important context that he didn't pass it. And his whole thing was like, I'm not signing on to it, but to the things that he's saying, but he's at least credible. So why are we just denouncing him and acting like he's crazy? And by the way, he did something similar with when he was on Fox News. He interviewed Kanye West. It was like, everyone is saying he's crazy, but when I talk to him, he's one of the most thoughtful and clear-minded people I've spoken to. But what did Fox News do? Fox cut, or at least Tucker show cut out segments where he said like stuff that was like Black Israelite sort of stuff about how they're like the real Jews and other things like that, things that his audience would have found to be wacky, or things that I'm sure Tucker probably thought was wacky, that they just chopped out of the interview. So they're showing all the selective stuff, to the audience to try to get out a particular perspective that they want to push. And for some reason, he wanted to push Kanye and make it seem like wasn't off and anti-Semitic or anything like that and run cover for them. And for some reason, he didn't want to push back at all the idea that Obama slept with a guy and did hard drugs with him and all this other kind of stuff when he was a state senator. You know, I'm no Obama fan. Heck no. But you still want to be honest about the different things that are going on, you know? So that made me really, really look at Tucker sideways about how he conducts his interviews, because if it's a, you know, someone he doesn't want to push back on, he really doesn't ask like a lot of clarifying questions, especially ones that are going to challenge. But when it comes to Ted Cruz, he was very aggressive, and he really pushed back a lot on Huckabee too. But even this particular clip, at first he's like, oh, when he heard about the guy lying, and then he's like, well, how do you know that's the same kid? How do you know that what you're saying is true? And now Huckabee saying, I can get you information on that. He's like, I think you know that there's no fighting, like they weren't armed. It's just insisting that. So, and he insisted other things that ended up being not true that he had to go ahead and apologize for. So I'll just continue playing this clip.
You okay with using live ammunition at aid distribution sites for families, women, and children?
Well, very rarely it's happened here.
How about it? Are you okay with that?
No. Not
okay.
No. I think you are so trying to put words in my mouth.
You said that they were firing back, but then there's no evidence that they were.
On a Sunday afternoon, I can remember when there was widespread.
I'm sorry. Let me go back to the thing with the guy that he platformed though about lying about the kid. He's like, well, are you sure that's the? How do you know? He said, because we found the little boy. We found him alive. Are you sure it's the same kid? Like it's just interesting how he, and he's like, well, even when Huckabee like explains how wrong this guy was, Tucker still tries to say, well, maybe he was just wrong. Like, I thought he was really sincere when he said all this stuff. He has a particular sort of worldview that he's pushing, and there's a reason why the Iranians and other folks play Tucker Carlson stuff, snippets of his stuff around the world, people who we would deem to be our enemies, who are propping up Tucker Carlson because he's propping up them and tearing down their particular enemies. And he just says stuff all the time to undermine the West too. So Tucker's a real issue.
It's on BBC, CNN, and the New York Times, and they said that 27 people were killed at a feeding site. We had video extensively over that site. Not one single person, not only were the shot, he was shot at. There was not one bit of violence that happened at that feeding site.
Trying to get me to defend BBC? I'm not going to do that. It's like defending Hamas. I agree with you. I don't believe anything I see in the media. It's just that it's really simple. If people are using, and these were American contractors, by the way, these are not Israelis that I'm aware of. American contractors run by some crypto minister or something was running the group. If they're using live ammunition at an aid distribution site, that strikes me as totally unacceptable.
They were not firing.
Does it seem acceptable to you?
They were not firing at crowds.
People got killed. There's a way to.
Some of those people got killed because Hamas were trying to keep them from getting to the aid distribution sites because Hamas was controlling the food. Hamas made $500 million selling the food that was supposed to be given away for free.
Defend Hamas.
And what they were trying to do is to keep people from going to the sites where they were getting food for free. When we set GHF up,
Hamas
the
bad,
first thing
BBC
that happened,
bad.
I know,
Agreed.
but I'm telling you, the first thing that people said was, wow, this is the first time we've had food that we got for free.
Is it okay to buy unarmed people?
I just told you it wasn't.
That's awful.
Yeah,
it's awful.
Of course it's awful.
Are all lives equal, do you think?
Of course they are.
So the death of a Palestinian is every bit as important and significant as the death of Israel?
Why wouldn't it be? Of course it is.
I don't know.
Of course it is. There's no such thing as a human soul that God made that is less valuable than another. I'm pro-life.
Me too.
So I believe that every life has intrinsic worth and value. There's no such thing as a worthless or a completely disposable life. That's what makes me pro-life, Tucker.
I totally agree.
And I believe that from the conception until the end of natural life.
That's why I would never say when confronted with the death of children, war is terrible, because it minimizes the deaths of those children. It's awful. And
I don't think it minimizes. I think it is outrageous. It's a terrible thing. I wish we never had war. Why do we have war?
We're about to have one with Iran, it looks like. How many Americans do you think? will die in that war.
I hope none. None died last year when we participated in the 12-day war. Not one. You said 20,000 would die, and they didn't.
I said could, and they could have. And
But
they could die now, and that's a real risk.
How many boots on the ground do you think the U.S. has supplied for Israel over the course of its life? How many times have we put soldiers on the ground for Israel?
Well, we had the Iraq War, which was for Israel.
No, it wasn't for Israel.
How was it for us?
Well, because it was a retribution against 9/11. Now, was it the best idea?
Was Iraq involved in 9/11?
Our government thought so.
By the way, because people bring up that Bibi went to go speak to Congress and stuff. Bibi was a citizen at the time, and the actual government of Israel was urging the U.S. not to do that. So that's a lie. But I just thought it was interesting. I know we already saw a clip about the 20,000 thing, but that the clip of Tucker's claim that we're going to lose all these American troops. It was just funny when he was like, "Well, you said this," and he didn't say could. He said absolutely. Tucker just being really, really ridiculous, or even questioning his going to the pro-life thing. Like, pro-life means that you're against abortion and eugenics. That's what it's about. It's you could just, if you want to just, talk about abortion abolition, like, or you're anti-abortion, and those are the terms you want to use. We could do that, but being pro-life specifically means that you are against abortion and you are against euthanasia. It is not about warfare. It's not about the death penalty. And I know people will carry those convictions into those kind of conversations, but it is specifically about abortion and euthanasia. And a lot of people don't even think about euthanasia, which it probably needs to be a bigger topic, especially with MAID in Canada and people trying to expand it more in the US and stuff. So we probably need to talk more about euthanasia here. But usually we're just talking about abortion and saying that war is terrible if it takes any kind of life. Is not excusing it or just being flippant about human life. You could saying whatever it is like being flippant, acknowledging that it is terrible when life is lost. It isn't being flippant about human life, whether it's an Israeli child or a Palestinian child. It's just not. But it is a reality, and it's childish to pretend like there's not going to be casualties in war. And it's, what are the options that Israel is supposed to take, especially get their people back? And I like to point out to all the America First people that the last American hostage didn't come back till May of last year. So where's the care and concern for them? If I was in Israel during the time of October 7th and they grabbed me and they took me to Gaza and I was in a cave, or maybe I wouldn't have been in a cave, maybe I would have been held by some family and sexually assaulted every other day and made to, cook them food and do all kinds of different housework and whatnot. Maybe that would be my situation. I would want to be rescued. I'd want to be rescued. And the military would have to do that. How do you think Israel should go about it? A lot of people say, well, they have the right to defend themselves. It's not a fist fight. It's not a fist fight. And the hostages couldn't click their heels 3 times and wake up back in their beds. It's not a fairy tale. But you're not ethical because you want to take an easy way out and say, oh, I would never kill a 14-year-old that was going to rape my daughters. That's insane. Absolutely insane. Anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. Oh, I mentioned it so earlier, so let me just say, I guess what I had to say was kind of all that I kind of had to say about the BAFTA situation. BAFTA, they have their awards, and Michael B. Jordan and another actor was presenting awards. And there was one film, I don't remember the name of the film, but it's about someone who had Tourette's and worked in Tourette's advocacy and awareness and his life story. So he was actually in the audience, the person with Tourette's, and they yelled out the N-word when they saw the two black men. And people heard it on TV. It's being talked about on TikTok and stuff. A friend of mine brought it to my attention. I was scrolling and I saw her video on it. And, you know, a lot of people are calling the man racist. I just saw a video with a black man who has Tourette's, and he said, you really can't help what you say. And he said when he was a kid, he would say terrible things to his mom that he didn't mean in his heart in the least bit. But he would say that. So he has a lot of sympathy for the man, and said he doesn't think that he's racist, and you really can't control what you say. So I think maybe people attacking this man, you know, calling him racist and all this other kind of stuff isn't fair. It's just a more complex situation than that. Kudos to Michael B. Jordan for keeping his cool and just kind of going on. But it is that would be kind of an alarming situation. Like, what the heck? And to just kind of keep going on. Like my friend Savvy talked about how exposed and maybe even fearful you would feel in that kind of situation. I don't know if fearful would be I guess you don't know how you'd feel in the exact moment when something like that happens. I'd be definitely taken aback by it, and shocked, and I would try to definitely keep my composure. I maybe feel, I don't know if fear would be the right word for me. But it would, you definitely wouldn't expect it. Now there were different statements about for the host was like, we're sorry. They explained what happened, and they said, you know, I'm sorry if you're offended. I don't know if sorry if you're offended is the right sort of phrasing at that kind of at that point of time. Just apologize, because when you say I'm sorry if you were offended, it can sound kind of passive aggressive, and sometimes people do say that a little passive aggressive when you say something, you know, they didn't like it, and it's like, well, sorry, you know, it just can come off passive aggressive. So I don't think that was probably the best words to use to excuse that to the audience and the live viewers who were watching it. But it's just a unique, odd situation, and just was kind of interesting thing that happened. So kudos to the actors for keeping their cool, because that is a, they did make history though in some of the categories with the Sinners film, which I still haven't seen. It was I don't know, it just didn't look like something I kind of really wanted to watch, and it looked I heard it wasn't that great from people who I trust, and knowing that it's kind of gritty and sexual, I don't know if the things that I definitely wouldn't like about it are worth overlooking for the rest of the creative that I might or might not enjoy, you know? So I just never watched it. And so I'm probably I might never watch it. But congrats on your success, I got. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me. Please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do, please consider leaving a donation on the website, because it does cost a stream and run my site, all that stuff. So you guys can support. I very much appreciate it, and appreciate you guys. You guys can also check out different merch that's available on the site, like different t-shirts, and I do have mugs, and I do have different books you guys can check out. There's a link in the description that'll take you to my book Bigger if you guys want to check that out. God bless you guys, and I will see you next time.